In the haunted shadow of the fall, when the stars themselves trembled with the echoes of Eldar sorrow, legends whisper of paths forgotten by time. The Exodites, those wanderers who rejected the slow death of decadence, have always stood as symbols of endurance and spiritual purity. But what if their story is even stranger? If, in the face of doom, some among them chose not to flee, not to merely survive, but to utterly transform? Across the void, rumors persist of Eldar who turn to the ancient roots of existence, merging with stone, flesh, or even the verdant heart of distant worlds. The truth is elusive, but the possibilities haunt the imagination. That somewhere in the endless dark, the legacy of the Eldar runs deeper than memory, entwined in earth and flesh, waiting to be remembered. When the Eldar civilization stood at the very edge of annihilation, the cosmos seemed to shudder beneath the weight of their tragedy. For countless millennia, the Eldar had basked in the zenith of glory, architects of wonders beyond human comprehension, their cities radiant with psychic artistry and dreams spun into reality. But beneath the opulence and splendor, a sickness had begun to fester, a spiritual rot seeded by excess, arrogance, and the slow abandonment of restraint. As their pleasures grew ever more twisted and their arts ever more decadent, the Eldar became strangers to themselves, losing sight of the ancient virtues that once bound them together. When the great cataclysm struck, tearing open the very fabric of reality and birthing Slaanesh in a scream that shattered the warp, the horror was beyond even the darkest of their nightmares. Worlds died, souls were consumed by a hunger that would never be sated, and the once proud race was scattered to the void, pursued by the endless echoes of their own failings. The moment of the fall was not a single instant, but a drawn-out agony that resonated across worlds. In that epic of despair, there were those who fled, those who took to the craft worlds, hurling themselves into the stars in search of hope. Yet for every Exodite who found the courage to leave, another was paralyzed by grief or burned by shame. The rending apart of their society was not just the loss of home or kin, but the obliteration of meaning, the unmaking of everything the Eldar believed about themselves and their destiny. It was a psychic trauma that would never fully heal, even after 10,000 years. Eldar who survived bore scars not only on their bodies, but on their very souls, their dreams forever haunted by the cries of those lost to She Who Thirsts. Among the chaos, the Exodites emerged as a living paradox. They embodied both the will to survive and the desperate hope for redemption. Yet their decision was not made in unity or peace. It was forged in panic, argument, and the severing of ancient bonds. Eldar society shattered into 1,000,000 shards, each reflecting a different response to horror. Some clung to tradition, others descended into madness, and some vanished entirely. Families were torn asunder, old alliances crumbled, and the once harmonious chorus of Eldar civilization became a discordant wail. The act of departure, of turning their backs on everything they had ever known, required a cold kind of courage, one born not of certainty, but of a final, desperate need to escape annihilation. For many, the grief was too much to bear. The memory of paradise lost became a wound that bled across generations. And yet, it was in this moment of supreme loss that the possibility for new paths emerged. The choice faced by the Exodites was both an act of faith and a leap into the unknown. No one could foresee what their sacrifice would mean for the future of their race. Some whispered that there had to be other options, forgotten magics, ancient covenants with the very worlds themselves, or secret rituals to escape the jaws of damnation. In the shattered silence of exile, the seeds of myth began to grow. It is here, in the breaking of the Eldar soul, that the legend of those who chose the path of stone and flesh finds its roots, not as a singular event, but as a splintered hope clinging to the edge of oblivion, a dream of transformation as the ultimate act of survival. The Exodites stand as the stubborn heartbeat of a people scarred by cosmic hubris. When the fall devoured their homeworlds, not all Eldar surrendered to despair or madness. There were those who, in the final hours before apocalypse, turned away from the golden cities and chose instead a future forged in hardship, pain, and discipline. These pioneers were not only survivors, they were believers in the idea that redemption could only be found through sacrifice and the rekindling of ancient virtues. The Exodite philosophy was a living rejection of the decadence that birthed Slaanesh. To them, every pleasure denied, every luxury abandoned, was an act of atonement. They saw the soul not as a vessel for endless delight, but as a garden choked by weeds, requiring fire and toil if anything pure was to remain. Their migration was brutal and unrelenting. Unlike the craft-worlders, who preserved fragments of lost grandeur in their world ships, the Exodites abandoned nearly every comfort of civilization. They set out for the Maiden Worlds, planets seeded with Eldar life long before the Fall, and there they became strangers to the old ways, forging new societies in the wild. The pain of separation was immense, yet the Exodites embraced it, believing that only through suffering could the stain of their ancestors be cleansed. Their culture became a crucible defined by discipline and simplicity. On the Maiden Worlds, they rebuilt, not as masters but as stewards, bound by pacts with the land and the spirits within it. Yet the Exodite path was not simply one of denial. There was a defiant beauty in their endurance, a stubborn hope that the soul could be remade. They transformed their own culture, turning away from the old psychic arts and decadent rituals, focusing instead on survival and symbiosis with the world around them. The relationship with their dragons, the mighty beasts they raised and rode, was not just practical, but profoundly symbolic. In taming the wild, the Exodites believed they were also taming themselves. Each scar, each hardship, became a testament to their refusal to repeat the mistakes of their kin. But even as they looked outward to the future, the ghosts of the past lingered. The Exodites remembered the paradise they had lost, the songs of the craft worlds, and the laughter that once filled the halls of their vanished empire. Their art became more somber, their music a lament for innocence forever gone. They held to rituals of remembrance, teaching each new generation the dangers of pride and the poison of excess. And through it all, they carried the burden of knowing that, in turning away from their heritage, they had also severed the bonds that once united all Eldar. The pain of this loss was as real as any wound. It was this philosophy, this insistence that meaning could be found in struggle, that dignity could be reclaimed through hardship, that allowed the Exodites to endure. Where others sought power or pleasure, they chose humility and discipline. In doing so, they offered a living challenge to the darkness within their race. Yet among their number, even stricter and stranger beliefs sometimes took root. Whispers of deeper union with the land, of rituals to merge body and spirit with the world itself, of redemption through becoming more than Eldar or less. The seeds of the path of stone and flesh may have been sown not in madness, but in the deepest yearning for forgiveness and the oldest memory of harmony with creation. Not every Eldar who survived the fall found themselves welcomed among the Exodites or the Craftworlders. In the aftermath of Apocalypse, when the ancient homeworlds were nothing but haunted ruin and psychic ash, there existed those who turned their backs on all collective paths, stepping into a solitary exile far stranger and more tragic than any sanctioned journey. These were the outcasts, the lost and the forsaken, whose very presence stood as a rebuke to every form of order the Eldar tried to salvage from the wreckage. Driven by grief, shame, or a stubborn refusal to conform, some rejected every creed, eschewing the martial discipline of the Asuryani, the stoic humility of the Exodites, even the decadent nihilism of the Drukhari. Their lives became acts of protest and sorrow, wandering the galaxy's edge, never finding peace among kin or star. There were whispers that some of these outcasts simply vanished, fading into the forgotten places between worlds. Among Exodite legend, there are tales of wandering Eldar, their eyes emptied by visions no living soul could withstand. These lost ones sometimes found solace in the deepest forests, or in the blackest reaches of alien planets, living alone or among primitive Xenos tribes. Some may have become rangers, keeping only the most tenuous ties to their people, a life of endless motion, haunted by the ghosts of their own history. Others are rumored to have given themselves over to silence, meditating in caves or high mountains, seeking meaning in isolation or starvation. In this way, the outcasts embody the Eldar tendency for extremes, a drive to find meaning at the very edge of annihilation. In the void, away from the last flickering embers of their civilization, some of these exiles embraced madness as their only companion. The soul of an Eldar is a thing of blazing intensity, and when cut off from song, ritual, and the psychic communion of kin, it can either wither or ignite. Some outcasts are believed to have destroyed themselves, unable to bear the psychic emptiness left by the fall, dissolving into the warp as if they never were. Yet others, rare and shrouded in rumor, are said to have found hidden ways to endure, taking to esoteric spiritual practices that sought to dissolve the boundaries of self. Their stories are the raw edge of myth, wandering shamans who plucked the strings of fate in loneliness, ascetics who survived on dust and sorrow, even those who sought to become one with the inanimate merging body and spirit with the bones of dead worlds. The path of the outcast is as much a psychic wound as it is a conscious decision. It is a refusal to accept any easy answers, a journey into grief so total that transformation, perhaps even transcendence, becomes the only solace. The galaxy, from the frozen moons of the halo stars to the lightless depths of the webway, holds echoes of these solitary travelers. Their pain is legend, but so too is their wisdom. In the stories that remain, they are sometimes the keepers of forbidden lore, the ones who remember the oldest songs and the truest names of the gods. Among all Eldar, they stand alone, not merely in distance but in spirit, forever marked by the choice to walk a path so narrow it can barely be called a path at all. In the silence of their exile, the possibility arises that some among them would not only abandon society, but their very forms, seeking union with the cosmos in ways no Eldar doctrine could ever condone. Deep in the cradle of Eldar myth, where fact blurs into allegory and memory becomes more potent than reality, there exist stories of those who chose the path of stone and flesh. These legends are seldom spoken among the living, for they are stories of a fate so profound it cannot be measured in mere survival or loss. Before the fall, the Eldar's connection to the spirit world was rich and unbroken. Ancient seers and poets recorded visions of transformation, of wise ones merging with the bones of the land or offering themselves to the earth so utterly that they became something both more and less than Eldar. These tales were not warnings or lessons, but sacred mysteries, reminders that the border between self and world was always thinner than it seemed. With the coming of the fall, these old tales became something else entirely, a memory of possibility when all other doors closed. Among the Exodites and the wandering survivors, whispers grew of the chosen few who, rather than depart into the void, sought to anchor themselves within the worlds they loved. The mythic origins of this idea draw on the oldest creation stories, heroes and saints dissolving their bodies to become the mountains, forests, or rivers of their maiden worlds. In the half-remembered twilight of apocalypse, it was said that some Eldar, guided by seers or driven by despair, enacted forbidden rites to become as enduring as stone or as fertile as living flesh entwined with the planet's soul. To outsiders, these stories seem nothing more than the fever dreams of a people destroyed by tragedy. But among the Eldar themselves, the resonance is deep and painful. For a race so attuned to the psychic echoes of the past, the notion of giving oneself entirely to the world, becoming its silent guardian, its hidden heart, holds a strange and terrible appeal. The legends tell of those whose forms petrified at the moment of transformation, their souls trapped in stone as watchful sentinels, or else whose bodies fused with root and branch, becoming part of the living ecology. These are not tales of defeat, but of ultimate union, an act of spiritual defiance against oblivion. The The psychic signature of such acts lingers in the warp, or so it is claimed by the rare farseer willing to contemplate them. The ancient stones of certain Exodite worlds bear carvings and faces far older than any settlement, their eyes watching in silence as centuries pass. In the deepest forests, gnarled trees are said to pulse with an energy both alien and familiar, their sap tasting of grief and memory. The craft-worlders speak of these things in hushed tones, unsure whether to revere or fear them. It is as if, in the breaking of their civilization, the Eldar called forth powers more primal than any technology or psychic art could control. Community lore fills in what canon cannot. Some say the first Exodites did not merely become settlers, but conduits for ancient rituals, using their own bodies as vessels for planetary spirits. Others imagine doomed lovers who, rather than be separated, melded together in living rock, their consciousness surviving the end of days as an eternal dream. There are even tales of warriors who, mortally wounded, chose the path of stone and flesh as a final act of service, becoming immovable bulwarks against the predations of Slaanesh or the mindless hunger of the warp. These myths are not static. Over centuries, they have become cautionary tales, prayers, or even secret aspirations among the most extreme Exodite cults. For a people who lost everything, the path of stone and flesh offers a final hope that something of the Eldar might survive even after all else is dust and memory. In these ancient stories, the agony of loss is matched only by the longing for permanence, for a place in the cosmos that not even the gods can take away. The path is hidden, shrouded in sorrow and awe, but it endures in the hearts of those who remember. Among the Exodites, where life is already defined by ritual and renunciation, stories persist of those who took their devotion to the land beyond all measure. If the heart of Exodite culture is union with their maiden worlds, then the so-called cult of stone stands at the extreme edge, a shadowy thread in their tapestry, woven from equal parts reverence and desperation. These were not the outcasts who merely abandoned civilization, nor the mystics content to meditate in solitude. Rather, these Eldar are imagined as visionaries and zealots who devised rites so intense, so fundamentally transformative, that they crossed the boundary between flesh and earth itself. In the dusk-lit groves of legend, Exodite shamans are said to have gathered at the thresholds of life and death, their faces painted with sacred ochre, their bodies inscribed with the runes of old gods. They enacted ceremonies whispered down from a time before memory. At the heart of the cult of stone was the conviction that the greatest act of atonement lay in total surrender to the world, the ultimate renunciation of the self that had, through pride, brought their race to ruin. In these rites, practitioners drank infusions of mineral-laden sap, lay upon beds of crystal and root, and called upon the spirits of rock and soil to accept them. Some tales tell of days and nights spent in trance, motionless and silent, until the transformation began. Skin hardening, veins turning to quartz, and consciousness slowly slipping into the cool, eternal embrace of the land. These cults were seldom large or public. Among the pragmatic Exodite communities, such radical acts were regarded with both awe and fear. Those who felt called to the cult of stone were often already set apart, marked by prophetic dreams, strange ailments, or inexplicable obsessions. Their departure was mourned as both a loss and a sacrifice, for the Exodites held to the belief that every soul was precious, every life a bulwark against extinction. And yet, there lingered a terrible fascination with those who walked willingly into oblivion, trusting that the earth would receive them and transform their failure into new strength. Legends abound of petrified figures standing in remote places, at the borders of Exodite settlements, atop sacred hills, or half swallowed by the roots of ancient trees. These statues are not art, but relics, bodies once living, now locked in silent vigil, faces worn but unmistakably Eldar. Children are warned not to disturb them, for the spirits within are said to be restless, dreaming still of the world they died to preserve. Some Exodite seers claim to hear faint voices from the stones during storms or planetary upheavals, a chorus of guardians offering warnings or blessings. It is possible in the darkest corners of Exodite culture that the cult of stone persists even now. Secret gatherings forbidden by clan elders but tolerated in hushed complicity enact rituals to honor and sometimes attempt to replicate the ancient transformations. To those who walk this path, the dissolution of self into the planetary soul is not death, but the highest calling, a way to redeem not only their own sins, but those of all Eldar. The stones that dot the Maiden Worlds are their silent testament, each one a story of loss, faith, and the unbearable hope that, in becoming the land itself, the Eldar can finally outrun the shadow of their past. The legend of Fleshcrafted redemption is the counterpoint to the cult of stone, a mythic path taken not into stillness, but radical change, where the boundary between Eldar and their world is crossed not through surrender, but through active creation. Among the Exodites and scattered survivors, there are stories of those who believed that atonement could be achieved not by abandoning the body, but by reshaping it, transcending the limits imposed by their ancient sins. These were the artisans and bioalchemists, visionaries who embraced transformation as a sacrament, wielding the arts of flesh as their ancestors once shaped light and soul. In secret groves or ruined laboratories, it is said these seekers worked with tools both sacred and forbidden. They drew on the lost lore of the old empire, where flesh and spirit were malleable, as easily sculpted as crystal or song. In the aftermath of the fall, this knowledge was seen by many as dangerous, tainted by the excesses that birthed Slaanesh. But to those who walked the path of fleshcraft, the technology of transformation was a way to break the cycle of guilt, a method to create new forms that might be immune to the temptations that destroyed their kind. The process was not mere surgery or genetic tinkering, but a ritual of deep psychic and spiritual significance. Fleshcrafters gathered at times of great celestial alignment, harnessing the energies of the warp and the living world. Volunteers submitted themselves to changes that ranged from subtle to profound. Bones lengthened or thickened to anchor them to the soil, skin turned to bark or iridescent scales, senses heightened or redirected to feel the pulse of the planet beneath their feet. Some legends describe Eldar who became part bestial, part elemental, warriors whose muscles rippled with the power of river currents, sages whose minds were interwoven with fungal mycelia, or the beating of 1,000 insect wings. To some Exodites, these acts were abhorrent, a new form of hubris that risked repeating the mistakes of the past. To others, they were a promise of hope, a chance to become something new, untainted by the old decadence. There are tales of entire enclaves vanishing into the wilds, never to be seen again, leaving behind only odd footprints, strange flora, or rumors of beautiful, uncanny beings glimpsed in moonlit forests. Whether these stories are truth or parable, they echo the core belief that transformation can be redemptive, that by remaking their bodies, the Eldar could also remake their destinies. The greatest among the Fleshcrafters were artists as much as scientists. Their work was not utilitarian but visionary, seeking harmony with the world around them. In the oldest songs of the Exodite bards, there are stories of leaders who became living bridges, their limbs rooting into riverbanks so that kin could cross during times of flood, or guardians who became monstrous trees, sheltering their people from the elements and the terrors of the night. These sacrifices were not seen as a loss, but as the ultimate expression of love and contrition, a willingness to forsake self so that the world and those who remained could endure. For those who chose the path of flesh-crafted redemption, immortality was not the goal. Instead, the aim was to weave oneself into the tapestry of life, to become part of the cycle that nurtures and transforms. The line between individual and world dissolved, and in that dissolution, the Eldar who walked this path found a strange, fierce hope. Their legacy lingers in the secret places of the Maiden Worlds, stories that grow like wildflowers from the bones of the past, reminders that even in the face of extinction, creation can be an act of defiance against oblivion. Across the scattered reaches of the galaxy, remnants of the forgotten Exodites endure, not as thriving societies, but as cryptic scars left on the worlds they once called home. While many believe the Exodite enclaves are lost entirely, there exist ruins and monuments that hint at a stranger, deeper story. On certain maiden worlds, the landscape itself is marked by shapes and structures that defy the ordinary patterns of Eldar civilization. There are winding paths lined with statues half swallowed by moss and lichen, colossal stone circles encircling silent groves, and ancient shrines etched with glyphs whose meaning has been lost even to the most learned farseers. Each artifact whispers of a people who once sought not only to inhabit their worlds, but to become part of them in ways both literal and metaphysical. These ruins are more than simple memorials. Among the most mysterious are the silent fields where petrified Eldar figures stand watch, their features softened by centuries of wind and rain. Some are clustered as if frozen mid-ritual, others isolated on lonely ridges or forest depths. Exodite shamans and visiting craftworlders alike sense a peculiar psychic resonance in such places, a sense of presence, an undercurrent of sorrow, as if the souls within the stone still linger, dreaming or mourning their unfinished journey. It is as if the land itself holds memory, with every boulder or tree a potential vessel for an ancient consciousness, every shadow a portal into forgotten grief. On certain worlds, the evidence is subtler. Symmetrical hills that echo the forms of Eldar bodies in repose, groves of trees that seem to grow in patterns reminiscent of old familial banners, and valleys where the grass grows in intricate designs only visible from the air. There are stories of travelers who hear voices on the wind, or find themselves overcome by inexplicable emotion, joy, terror, or aching loss upon entering such sacred places. Local Exodite communities guard these sites fiercely, considering them holy and refusing to explain their origins even to outsiders. Their silence is protective, a tacit acknowledgement that some mysteries are too profound or too dangerous to unravel. The ruined shrines are perhaps the most evocative reminders of these lost paths. Built from living crystal and stone, their architecture is unlike anything in modern Eldar society, shaped by hands that sought to blend spirit and matter, dream and reality. Within these temples, intricate reliefs depict scenes of transformation, Eldar dissolving into stone, merging with trees, or vanishing into pools of light. Farseers who have meditated within these ruins claim to experience visions, flashes of ancient ceremonies, fleeting impressions of unity and sacrifice, or warnings of doom yet to come. The ruins are simultaneously graves and gateways, bridges between what was and what might be again. These lost monuments have become the heart of countless rumors and legends. Some believe that, during times of crisis, the slumbering spirits within may awaken to defend their worlds, acting as silent guardians against the predations of chaos or the encroaching horrors of the galaxy. Others whisper that the monuments themselves are alive in some ineffable sense, subtly shaping the fate of those who dwell nearby. To many Exodites, the ruins are not simply a reminder of what was lost, but an inspiration, a living proof that even in defeat, the Eldar spirit can endure, seeding the land with meaning long after flesh and memory have faded. For the wandering Eldar, encountering these places is often a moment of spiritual reckoning. To stand among the lost shrines and stone monuments is to face the possibility that exile and transformation are not ends, but beginnings, the start of new legends written in the living bones of worlds scattered through the darkness. The monuments stand silent, but their presence is a song that echoes across time, binding together all who remember and all who dream of redemption. Some of the most haunting tales to echo through Exodite legend are those of the silent guardians, Eldar who, in seeking redemption or ultimate union with their worlds, became living statues or slumbering sentinels buried deep in planetary crusts. These are not merely symbolic tales of self-sacrifice, but legends woven with dread and awe, hinting at a fate both transcendent and terrible. Among the wild places of the Maiden Worlds, it is said there are watchful forms, bodies turned to stone or crystalline flesh, eyes closed in eternal vigil, waiting for a summons that may never come. These stories speak of individuals or even entire circles who, during times of greatest crisis, undertook rituals to meld their spirits with the living heart of the planet. The process is described as both agony and ecstasy. Flesh petrifies as willpower, and psychic energy are funneled inward, consciousness slipping beneath the surface to dream and guard. These stone-bound souls are not dead in the traditional sense. Rather, their spirits hover on the edge of waking, attuned to every tremor of their world, every psychic ripple of danger or hope. It is said that, on certain nights, the statues weep dew, or that their hands shift slightly with the changing of the seasons, as if feeling the pulse of the land. Among the most persistent of these legends are tales of the Stone Host, a group of Exodite warriors who, foreseeing doom upon their world, bound themselves to the mountains that ring their valley. When invaders came, it is said the mountains themselves shook, stone guardians awakening to crush the intruders with titanic force, then returning to silence when the threat had passed. Elsewhere, Exodite shamans speak of deep caves where entire families have fused into the roots and minerals, their minds woven together into a dreaming gestalt, forever vigilant against warp incursions. These guardians are both a warning and a promise that the Eldar spirit, when bound to its world, can become an enduring defense, sacrificing individuality to preserve what remains. There are stories as well of the half-awake, the restless sentinels whose stone forms are not quite inert. Children are cautioned not to play near the oldest statues, for sometimes they are heard to murmur in the dusk, or their eyes are found to follow intruders. Some claim these living statues possess a dim awareness of time's passage, a ceaseless longing for release or for the company of the living. In the most extreme accounts, dire portents or planetary disasters will rouse these guardians, their bodies animating with seismic force, their voices calling across the winds in forgotten dialects. The land itself seems to stir in sympathy, forests bending and rivers shifting, as if the world recognizes the pain and duty of its ancient protectors. For some Exodites, the legend of the Silent Guardians is a comfort, proof that their ancestors endure and defend them still. For others, it is a source of unease, a reminder that the line between heroism and oblivion is vanishingly thin. To become a living statue is to embrace eternity, but also to forego the warmth of song, the memory of kin, the gentle passage of time. In this self-chosen fate lies the core tragedy of the Eldar spirit. Its yearning for redemption is matched only by its capacity for suffering, and even the purest sacrifice cannot escape the long shadow of loss. Yet the stories endure. Pilgrims still travel to the sites of the Silent Guardians, offering gifts or prayers. Seers consult the dreaming sentinels for guidance, sometimes claiming to hear faint whispers in the psychic ether. It may be that, in the end, these living statues are more than myth. They are the unbroken bond between a broken people and the worlds they once vowed to protect. Their silence is a vow, a warning, and an invitation to remember that even stone can dream, and even the forgotten can guard what they love forever. Yet if stone is one axis of transformation, then flesh and flora mark another, an even stranger hope pursued by those Exodites who sought to merge not with rock, but with the teeming, ever-renewing life of their worlds. In the quietest glades in the deepest forests of the Maiden Worlds, there are tales of the Green Eldar, a lineage, sect, or state of being where the boundaries between Eldar and ecosystem dissolve entirely. Unlike their kin who hardened into vigilant stone, these souls let themselves become part of the ever-growing, ever-changing web of life, embodying the will of the planet itself in living, breathing form. The origin of the Green Eldar myth is as elusive as it is persistent. Some say it began with Exodite seers, who, feeling the weight of ancestral guilt, sought to cleanse their spirits through communion with the wilds. Through sacred rites and bioalchemy, they allowed themselves to be seeded by the forest, roots and vines twining through veins, skin blossoming with luminous growths, eyes darkening to pools of photosynthetic emerald. The children would be born with leaves in their hair and the scent of earth in their breath, able to speak with the ancient trees and call forth the wrath or blessing of the land itself. To these Green Eldar, transformation was not an end, but a continuous cycle of renewal and decay. Their bodies were a living expression of the seasons, shifting with wind and rain, flowering and withering only to rise again. Some became half tree, half hunter, guardians camouflaged in bark and moss, able to vanish at will among the forests they defended. Others took on the forms of beasts or birds, able to run with the wild packs or soar above the canopy, serving as scouts, protectors, or hidden watchers. The distinction between sentience and instinct blurred, but their consciousness always retained a fierce devotion to their kin and world. This path was not without pain or risk. The process of merging with the ecosystem could mean the gradual loss of self, memory fading, individuality dissolving into the greater will of the woods. For the Green Eldar, this was both a blessing and a curse, a final escape from the loneliness and psychic wounds that haunted their race, but also a surrender of identity that many found terrifying. In their most optimistic songs, the Green Eldar are celebrated as immortal stewards, cycling endlessly through life and death, giving their worlds a voice and purpose in the endless war against decay. In their darkest tales, they are tragic wraiths, neither fully Eldar nor fully wild, remembered only by the flowers that bloom each spring. Legends persist of Exodite enclaves where the Green Eldar hold sway, invisible to outsiders, yet unmistakable in the vibrancy of the land around them. Crops grow taller, forests heal from wounds in days, and predators seem almost gentle. When danger threatens, the Green Eldar are said to emerge in terrible beauty, wielding the fury of the land itself. Vines that strangle invaders, poisonous blooms that cloud the air, or beast forms that hunt with uncanny intelligence. And when peace returns, they vanish once more, their presence marked only by a deep and comforting sense of harmony. To many Eldar, the Green Eldar are both a source of envy and fear. Envy for their unity with the world, fear for the price they pay. Among Exodite seers, the existence of these living legends is proof that survival can take forms undreamt of, that the soul's desire for redemption can lead to forms as wild and varied as life itself. In the secret groves and sunlit meadows of the Maiden Worlds, the myth of the Green Eldar is alive and growing, a testament to the power of change and to the endless, unbreakable bond between a people and the worlds they choose to save. The tragedy of the Exodites is not only one of isolation and sacrifice, but also of division, a rift cut deep between those who chose transformation and those who clung fiercely to the old ways. Nowhere is this more bitterly felt than in the encounters, rare but inevitable, between the Exodites and their craft world kin. Though both groups share the trauma of the fall and the longing for redemption, their paths have diverged so profoundly that when they meet, it is often with suspicion, grief, and even anger. For the Craftworlders, the discipline of the path system and the preservation of what remains of Eldar culture are acts of resistance, a bulwark against the darkness that destroyed their civilization. For the Exodites, especially those who have embraced radical transformation, the willingness to become something new is both necessity and faith. There are tales of Craftworld Eldar arriving on Maiden Worlds, seeking lost knowledge, ancient artifacts, or simply refuge from their endless war against extinction. They are often greeted as kin, but the kinship is uneasy, strained by centuries of separation and different philosophies. To see one's own people with skin of bark or features blurred by centuries of symbiosis with the world is a shock. a living challenge to the craft world belief that Eldar identity can and must be preserved at all costs. For many craft worlders, the sight of Exodites who have embraced the path of stone or flesh is as disturbing as any vision of the Drukhari's decadence or the Harlequin's madness. They see in the Exodites' choices not heroism, but a form of surrender, an abandonment of the heritage that once made the Eldar great. But from the Exodite perspective, the craft worlders' refusal to change is just as alien. The world ships, with their strict codes and artificial gardens, seem sterile compared to the wild abundance of the Maiden Worlds. Exodites sometimes pity their craft world kin, seeing in them a people frozen in time, endlessly mourning a paradise that can never return. For the Exodites who have given themselves to stone or become one with the land, the craft worlders' traditions seem not like salvation, but like denial, a clinging to a past whose lessons can only be learned through transformation, not preservation. When conflicts do arise, they are often subtle, fought with words, glances, or in the quiet refusal to share rituals or stories. The craft worlders may attempt to dissuade Exodites from the most extreme paths, warning of the psychic dangers of losing oneself or the moral hazards of bioalchemy. Exodite shamans, in turn, remind their kin that survival must come at any price, even if that price is the dissolution of what it means to be Eldar. In the most tragic cases, old friends or family members become strangers, unable to recognize what the other has become. Yet, beneath all this conflict lies a deeper grief, a recognition that both sides are trying to answer the same impossible question. How does a people survive the end of everything they once were? Some craft worlders, especially the young or those touched by prophecy, are drawn to the Exodite's courage and willingness to change. There are whispered stories of warriors and seers leaving the world ships to join their kin on the Maiden Worlds, seeking a new beginning or a more direct path to atonement. Conversely, there are Exodites who, weary of endless sacrifice, yearn for the beauty and discipline of the craft worlds, risking everything to return to a life their ancestors abandoned. These tensions are rarely resolved. Instead, they remain open wounds, shaping the psychic landscape of the Eldar as surely as any scar carved by war or chaos. For every moment of reconciliation, shared memories, rescued artifacts, or fleeting alliances in the face of common foes, there are many more of sorrow and misunderstanding. The divide between transformation and tradition is, in truth, the tragedy of all Eldar, a people so gifted at change, yet so haunted by the things they cannot bear to lose. In the psychic heart of the Eldar, the legends of the path of stone and flesh have left wounds and wonders that will never fully heal. Though only whispered in sacred groves or recited as cautionary tales in the shadowed halls of craft worlds, these stories echo through every aspect of Eldar culture. They are the myths against which new generations measure the limits of their own endurance, the taboos that define the border between sanity and oblivion. For a race that lives so deeply in memory, in song, and in the warp's tumultuous tides, these forgotten paths haunt dreams and shape destinies, even for those who have never set foot on a Maiden World. The psychic resonance of the path of stone and flesh is profound. For those Eldar attuned to the skeins of fate, the presence of their transformed kin, whether petrified, woven into roots, or vanished into the forest, can be felt as a persistent ache, a kind of background song that colors all other thoughts. In times of great stress, Exodite shamans and craft world seers alike sometimes dream of silent guardians or green-skinned kin who watch from the edge of vision, neither threatening nor entirely comforting. These apparitions become omens, reminders that the soul's capacity for change is limitless, but that transformation always carries a cost. Among the Exodites, the memory of stone and flesh is woven into ritual and language. The changing of the seasons, the planting and harvest, even the tending of wounds are moments when the lessons of their transformed ancestors are invoked. Children are taught to respect the silence of the stones, to listen for the wisdom in the wind through the trees, to seek meaning not only in survival, but in becoming part of something larger than themselves. The path of stone and flesh becomes, for some, an aspiration, proof that there is honor in sacrifice, that even the greatest pain can be endured for the sake of the world. For others, it is a threat, the looming possibility that suffering can become its own form of madness. On the craft worlds, the legends are held at a distance. Eldar who have walked the path of the seer or the warrior may speak with awe of the courage it took to surrender oneself so completely, but most regard these tales as a warning against excess, against letting grief or guilt lead one too far from tradition. Yet the path of stone and flesh has its allure even here, in the art of the bone singers, who shape wraithbone from spirit and memory, or in the trance visions of those who have lost kin to the Exodite wilds. The stories become a mirror in which the Eldar see both what they fear and what they long for, release from pain, unity with the cosmos, or simply a way to matter in a galaxy that has forgotten their greatness. The psychic impact of these myths is not limited to ritual or remembrance. Some Exodites and outcasts report episodes of shared dreaming, visions in which the spirits of the transformed reach out with warnings or blessings, guiding lost souls through danger or despair. There are reports of psychic echoes in battle, when the land itself seems to rise up in defense of its children, or when a dying Eldar senses the presence of the silent guardians, welcoming them home. These phenomena blur the lines between myth and reality, suggesting that the sacrifices of the past are not only remembered, but continue to shape the present in ways both subtle and profound. Ultimately, the path of stone and flesh is a meditation on the nature of survival. For the Eldar, whose every breath is a defiance of extinction, the willingness to change, no matter the cost, remains both their greatest strength and their deepest tragedy. The myth endures because it answers a question that no other path can fully resolve. What are we willing to become in order that something of us might last? In the long shadow of the fall, the stories of stone and flesh offer no comfort, only the promise that even suffering can be beautiful, and that the spirit of the Eldar, in all its wild forms, will never entirely fade. There is a kind of beauty in the story of the forgotten Exodites, a beauty born from loss, from yearning, and from the refusal to let despair be the final word. In the broken shadows where legend and memory intertwine, these Eldar who chose the path of stone and flesh are more than mere curiosities. They are the lost heart of a people who once dreamed of eternal joy, then paid the price for their pride in blood, sorrow, and the surrender of everything that made them who they were. The world may never know for certain whether Exodites truly became living statues, merged with forests, or faded into the green and granite bones of their worlds. But the legends persist, whispering through the warp and through every song the Eldar dare to sing. For the survivors, these stories are both burden and inspiration. To walk the wilds of a maiden world, knowing that every stone might hold the spirit of a guardian, every tree the memory of a lover lost to transformation, is to live in a world thick with meaning. The Exodite sacrifices remind all Eldar that there are fates worse than death, but also glories that outshine mere survival. The monuments and living landscapes are not only echoes of the past, but seeds for the future, a quiet promise that redemption, however costly, is never out of reach for those willing to become something new. In a galaxy that grinds civilizations to dust, the willingness to transform is a rebellion, a prayer, and a legacy. Even now, in a universe haunted by ancient ruin and predatory gods, the memory of the forgotten Exodites lives on. Their fate may never be written in official histories, but their stories flicker in every act of courage, every gesture of love or sacrifice that binds Eldar to Eldar and world to world. To imagine their journey is to confront the wild, unbroken hope at the heart of tragedy, a hope that some part of the Eldar soul will always endure, be it in stone, in flesh, in green shadow or shining dawn. If this tale moved you, if you want to dive deeper into the haunted myths and mysteries of Warhammer's grimdark galaxy, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every like, comment, and share helps us keep the lore alive, and together we'll keep unearthing the forgotten paths wherever they might lead.